and I want to thank you all for joining me on Trials and Triumphs. I know I said last week that we would probably be switching tracks for a few weeks, but more information has come to light about the detransitioner lawsuits that I want to share with you. I cannot stress enough that there is no reason ever to transition a child and turn them into permanent patients for unscrupulous doctors and pharmaceutical companies. You know, I'm one of those that actually believes that God gave us everything we needed on this earth to heal ourselves and take care of ourselves. You know, He made us a wonderful world, and He made us perfectly in our mother's womb, and we need to accept that fact. Today I want to start off by discussing Luca Hine and her nightmare journey into the insanity of transgenderism and the mutilation of a child. After just 2 medical appointments, Luca Hine underwent a double mastectomy at the age of 16. Now at age 21, the Minnesota detransitioner is suing her doctors for the rushed procedures, becoming the 5th person in the United States to pursue legal action for hasty gender-affirming treatment. As we've talked about over the last 3 weeks or so, I feel like I've been doing this on the transgenderism issue for about 3 years, but actually it's only been about a year and a half, 2 years. But as we've talked about over the last 3 weeks, at least 5 lawsuits have been brought against the medical professionals and hospital facilities that were entrusted with their care when they were teenagers. Luca Hine's story is particularly noteworthy, so let's take a look at it this week. Luca relates that she was, quote, going through the darkest and most chaotic time in her life, and instead of being given the help she needed, these doctors affirmed that chaos into reality. She continued by saying, I don't think kids can ever consent to having full bodily functions taken away at a young age before they even know what that means. I was talked into medical intervention that she could not fully understand the long-term impacts and consequences of. Luca's 28-page lawsuit, filed in the District Court of Douglas County in Nebraska against 4 University of Nebraska Medical Center staff, sketches out the remaining storyline. At age 13, Luca was experiencing mental health problems in the midst of her parents' tumultuous divorce. Shuffled between households, she began struggling at school, losing her appetite, suffering from panic attacks, and flirting with self-harm and the idea of suicide. Luca was soon diagnosed with depression and anxiety and was hospitalized several times for her mental health. In 2017, she found comfort online in the form of an older man who lived out of state and began grooming her, persuading her to send sexually explicit photos and issuing threats if she refused. Though Luca ultimately cut contact with the man, the traumatic experience left her feeling extremely uncomfortable with her experience of puberty, specifically her period and her developing breasts. Following gender influencers online, Luca was soon convinced she was the wrong gender. She began identifying as a male, ordered a chest binder, left her all-girls school, and changed her name. Luca began wondering if removing her breasts would help with the mental health. She met with doctors in July of 2017 who diagnosed her with gender identity disorder just 55 minutes into her first session. According to the papers filed with the court, by October of the same year, Luca was put on hormone treatments and coerced into a double mastectomy. A year later, the surgery took place and was followed by 4 years of testosterone treatment. She and her parents were also told the ever-popular lie of, would you rather have a live son or a dead daughter? Now Luca says the collective treatment she underwent has left her with constant pain in her joints, spine, hands, wrists, and elbows, has given her heart irregularities, and may prevent her from experiencing motherhood. She is suing OBGYN physician Dr. Nahia Amora, therapist Megan Smith-Salins, surgeon Dr. Perry Johnson, and Dr. Stephen Barrientos, who aided in the surgery. Her suit alleges that each of the defendants were negligent in failing to question Lucas' self-diagnosis instead of affirming her towards irreversible chemical and surgical solutions. It also argues that the medical staff should have noticed the red flags in Lucas' case, including her mental health, her family turmoil, and the online abuse she suffered. The litany of psychosocial factors should have caused a reasonably prudent plastic surgeon to not perform a double mastectomy on such a troubled teenage patient, according to the lawsuit. Luca is represented by the Center for American Liberty, the same nonprofit that has taken on the cases of Chloe Cole and Layla Jane. Luca's story shines the spotlight on the detransitioning phenomena, though the transgender activists tell you no one wants to detransition, and doing so is an aberration in the mainstream discourse. According to a recent review published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, 30% of teens and young adults had discontinued gender-affirming hormones after 4 years. Another Journal of Adolescent Health article published this year found that 29% of youth changed their requests over time for hormone treatment or surgery. It's too late now for Luca to make such a change, but through her story and her lawsuit, she might just change a few more minds. Nearly half of the states have passed legislation restricting or banning what is referred to as gender-affirming care for minors. Most of those laws have been challenged in court, with some judges upholding the bans while others have blocked them. Regardless of where the courts, including the United States Supreme Court, may end up, the real check on gender-affirming care for minors may come from the multi-million-dollar lawsuits now being filed against the physicians and healthcare centers that provide the care. The dramatic growth of gender dysphoria, defined as the feeling of discomfort or distress that might occur in people whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth, should raise eyebrows. You should raise it first at the fact that you are not assigned a sex at birth. God made us male and female, and when you're born, the doctor will hold you up and take a look at you, and your external body parts will indicate whether you are male or female. Everything else comes later in life, and you can deal with it then, but you are not assigned a sex at birth. In a Writers Komodo Health Analysis report, it said in 2021, about 42,000 children and teens across the United States received a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, nearly triple the number that was found in 2017. Overall, the analysis found that at least 121,882 children ages 6 to 17 were diagnosed with gender dysphoria from 2017 through 2021. Gender dysphoria is not a contagious disease, so a tripling of the numbers in 5 years implies social contagion, nothing biological. And I will say personally that if you are trying to diagnose a 6-year-old as gender dysphoric, then you should go find another doctor immediately, okay? 6-year-olds do not know what they want in life. Put a stack of cookies and $10,000 on a table and see which one they go for, okay? They're going to take the cookies. Based on insurance data from millions of minors ages 6 through 17, The study found that some 4,780 adolescents began puberty blockers, and 14,726 minors began hormone treatment, which forces their bodies to begin taking on characteristics of the gender they want to assume. The report adds, hormone treatment may leave an adolescent infertile, especially if the child also took puberty blockers at an early age. In other words, there are very serious and often permanent consequences to this so-called gender-affirming care. And then there's the surgeries. Komodo identified 776 mastectomies, what most people involved in the social contagion refer to as top surgeries, and 56 genital surgeries on children ages 13 to 17 between 2019 and 2021. Those numbers are much larger today. We are talking about children who often go through phases during adolescence seeking medical interventions that will affect their health and bodies for the rest of their lives. I would think that medical professionals would be intelligent enough to be skeptical of this path, but I assume the financial windfall these professionals are experiencing outweighs their Hippocratic oath. However, organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics has a policy statement updated last August recommending that youth who identify as TGD, that's transgender or gender diverse, have access to comprehensive gender-affirming and developmentally appropriate health care that is provided in a safe and inclusive clinical space. I'm not buying any of that, okay? Even the pediatric people are trying to transition your children. In addition, quote, the insurance plans offer coverage for health care that is specific to the needs of youth who identify as TGD, including coverage for medical, psychological, and when indicated, surgical gender-affirming interventions. I, however, find that this gender-affirming care is very hard to reconcile, especially since 41 states have passed laws outlawing the ritual and cultural practice of female genital mutilation, FGM, which the United States State Department defines as cutting and other procedures that injure the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. It continues that the United States government considers FGM/C to be a serious human rights abuse and a form of gender-based violence and child abuse. By law in most states, children cannot consent to the practice even if their parents want it. And even if they want it, they cannot get the female genital mutilation, so why are we mutilating all these other young people, trying to turn them into the opposite sex when we know that that will never happen? Okay, it's a pipe dream. That's all it is. A growing number of detransitioner lawsuits are going to test the claims and practice of its transgender nightmare. Gender-affirming care is becoming big business. Revenue from sex reassignment surgery is currently at about $2.5 billion and is estimated to grow to $5 billion by 2030. And that's just for the surgeries. It's way too early to tell whether the growing number of detransitioner lawsuits will succeed, but I suspect that many of them will. Juries are likely to be very sympathetic to the claims of minors who clearly needed mental health care but received life-altering medication and surgeries instead. Multi-million-dollar jury awards may be the best option for making the gender-affirming medical complex more acceptable. And I have to say that sooner or later, some of these minor children who were transitioned are going to sue more than just the medical facility and the physicians. Parents are going to get sued sooner or later, especially these who think that all of a sudden they want to be the cool mom in the neighborhood and decide to transition their children at a young age when they have no idea of what is going on. You know, I have to tell you, if your child is 3-4 years old and it's a boy and he's playing with dolls, that does not make him a girl. And a girl who is playing with trucks or hammers and things like that, she is not a boy, okay? Our children deserve better than what they're getting right now. A report out of the United Kingdom emphasized that the strengths and weaknesses of the evidence base on the care of children and young people are often misrepresented and overstated. Thousands of young people received life-altering treatments for no good reason and with no good evidence on the long-term outcomes of interventions to manage gender-related distress. Social justice ideology is driving medical decision-making, and the toxicity of the debate has created an environment where professionals are so afraid to openly discuss the views. In 2007, Boston Children's Hospital opened the first pediatric gender clinic in the United States. The hospital boasted its gender multi-specialty services has, quote, expanded our program to welcome patients from ages 3 to 25. Anybody who accepts a 3-year-old as a transgender patient, to me, is a monster. During the following years, trans medicine became a major moneymaker as nearly 9,000 transgender surgeries were performed annually in the United States with a market value of $1.9 billion in 2021. Medical treatments for gender dysphoria typically include puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and eventually surgery on the genitals and breasts. The Mayo Clinic claims on its website that puberty blockers, quote, don't cause permanent physical changes. Instead, they pause puberty. I'm telling you that's an outright lie. It's a lie from the pits of hell, and you need to never think that puberty blockers just pause puberty. Pause puberty. Numerous research studies point to the opposite conclusion. A recent study, for example, reveals that puberty blockers for boys can cause mild to severe sex gland atrophy, resulting in long-term infertility problems. Girls' sexual organs will atrophy also, and, at that point, she probably cannot deliver a child vaginally if you've done this to her. She will have to have C-sections if she is able to get pregnant. And a lot of times, this causes infertility for a lot of people. The effects of gender treatments are profound. Surgically transitioned persons are unable to have sexual relations or to father or bear children. Their mental health often deteriorates. The pain is psychological, social, and physical. Sometimes these people come to realize that they made a grave mistake and decide to detransition, even though the transitioners mafia will tell you that that is not the case. On May 10th of 2022, the first detransitioner lawsuit was filed against the Kaiser Permanente Medical Group in California. 7 months later, Camille Kiefel, she was also one of my former guests here on Trials and Triumphs, filed a similar lawsuit in Oregon against the Quest Center for Integrative Health, which had performed a double mastectomy on her. Now the number of detransitioner and wrongful death lawsuits has increased 8-fold, according to Transition Justice. These lawsuits allege a breach of the standard of care, including failing to perform a mental health evaluation, lack of informed consent, and battery. One of the leading law firms in this area, Campbell Miller Payne, reports that medical providers are beginning to shut down their gender modification services, such as Children's Hospital of Colorado and Washington University in St. Louis. But inexplicably, the Biden Department of Education is moving ahead with its plan to finalize a Title IX regulation that would change the definition of sex to include gender identity. Marxist Shulamith Firestone once revealed that the goal of the feminist revolution is the elimination of the sex distinction itself. Genital differences between human beings would no longer matter culturally. The tyranny of the biological family would be broken. I don't consider my biological family to have been under tyranny in any fashion whatsoever. So the tyranny of the biological family would be broken. Why would we even want that? Why would we even go there? And who else in the world thinks that that is proper? Future historians are going to marvel about how a neo-Marxist ideology ignited a global gender hysteria, giving rise to the most egregious examples of medical malpractice in recorded history. Gender clinics are mutilating vulnerable children, and the madness has got to stop. Luca Hines' trauma at the hands of medical professionals at the University of Nebraska Medical Center is another wake-up call exposing the nation to the barbaric realities of gender-affirming care. When Luca was just 16 years old, doctors rushed her into a radical double mastectomy without first trying less invasive treatment options like counseling, without first prescribing puberty blockers or hormone therapy, and after just 2 visits to the University of Nebraska Medical Center, UNMC, gender clinic. At that moment, UNMC doctors robbed Luca of her womanhood. Throughout her teen years, Luca experienced several traumatic events that caused her mental health to deteriorate. She struggled in school. She had panic attacks. She began cutting and expressed suicidal ideation. In an effort to understand what she was going through, Luca started searching the internet, where she found transgender influencers who praised gender transitioning through hormones and surgery. As a result, Luca began identifying as male, convinced that transitioning would solve her mental health problems. This was all UNMC doctors needed to irreversibly harm Luca. UNMC doctors deceived Luca and her parents with false promises, claiming that if Luca did not undergo the removal of her breasts, she would take her own life, despite medical evidence to the contrary. UNMC also concealed scientific studies that do not support surgical transitions for minors, including studies showing transgender surgeries actually increase suicidality and a psychiatric morbidity. Today, Luca is fighting back. No child should have to go through the irreversible trauma that UNMC doctors put Luca through, and if she wins her lawsuit, maybe no other child will. The number of detransitioner lawsuits against doctors, insurance companies, psychiatrists, psychologists, and others continue to grow, as well as the wrongful death lawsuits where doctors in transgender surgeries brought upon the death of someone's child. Now, none of the trans activists or anybody like that wants to tell you about anybody that died going through this. Death is a definite possibility on this, and if you go and change a child's gender and they finally decide that that was not what they wanted to do, but there's no reversal of those actions, you're probably going to end up with a dead child then too. We're talking about children such as Isabella Ayala, who was 14 years old when she was committed to a hospital for suicidal thoughts. She met with a doctor who she says claimed she met the criteria to consider hormonal transition. In a lawsuit filed by the law firm of Campbell Miller Payne, which is specializing in representing detransitioners, Ayala, now 20 years old, says that instead of addressing her mental health needs, she was taken down a path of gender-affirming medicalization. She is suing her doctors and the American Academy of Pediatrics. There are over 16 detransitioner lawsuits that I'm aware of, and then the 2 wrongful death lawsuits for children that did not make it through their personal nightmare. My heart breaks for all of those families that have been manipulated into hurting their children. My heart breaks more for the children whose parents are pushing them to transition and become lifelong patients because of some selfish and whacked out idea of their parent. We have to admit at some point in life that our parents, in some cases, will try to transition a child, and it's just for their glory. They're the cool mom in the neighborhood who understands all this and transitions a 5 or a 6-year-old, and that is absolutely horrendous, and that is no way to treat your child. We've got to come up with some morality in this nation. We have to get back to the concept of the fact that our founders established the United States from a biblical standpoint. I know there's going to be a lot of people that argue that point, but look at what was done. It was a biblical standpoint, and we used to raise our children under the moral principles of the Bible, and we have got to return to that, or we're going to go down, we're just going to flush ourselves down a toilet. Our kids deserve better, and we as a nation need to stand up and put a stop to this mutilation of our children. I always pass a billboard on 13 Highway when I go towards Springfield that says, "How can God bless a nation that murders its unborn children?" I have to say, how can God bless a nation that mutilates and murders any of its children? So, again, we have run out of time, and so I want to thank you for joining me. If you would like to donate to the show and help offset the cost of my research, please do so at either Cash App or Venmo to Ladena Bough, LaDenaBough. I look forward to visiting with you again next week, and pray you all have a blessed week in front of you. Thank you.
To contact Trials and Triumphs, you can email Pastor Ladena Bough at trialsandtriumphs2@gmail.com. For more information, find Trials and Triumphs on Facebook and her podcast on Buzzsprout, as well as X under and Trials 56454, or Instagram